Hello and most welcome to 847. And today I will talk about control and to have an intention. And this is a very peculiar subject because it stretches over areas that we usually perceive to be quite disparate. But let me cut to the chase and get right into the juicy details of dividing and putting polarities. What does that do to, for instance, a text you want to read? Well, you simplify. Polarization is a sort of a simplification. And for instance, deconstructive movement is to help ease this simplification process, to make the text shine through in all its shades, peculiarities, differences, and depth. So you can also say that by polarizing, the level of depth is getting narrower, smaller, flatter. It's a flattening out of the text. I mentioned before that there is a good reason we don't read the big works of Western civilization. Our ability to read those texts has diminished, and they will not be as grandeur as they once were. The text will not be in depth anymore. And that is something deconstructive movement helps. It heals the text once more, make it accessible for the reader. And once more, it's no longer a text being read and correctly understood. It's a interrelationship and the interwovenness of the text with the reader. It's an active, moving process, and it always has unknown depths to it. And this more polarized reading, it's a level, it's a ladder, or it's a staircase. This is the closing of the mind. This is the shutting off of intelligence, of depth of perception, deeper understanding, more encompassing understanding. The full meaning of the text gets inflated by only having two sides. This is exactly the same thing as saying that a multicolored carpet is just brown and white. It's at the same time a reduction and a simplification, and it's not done only by the reader. It's also made by the text itself. So it's a dual act, it's a dual movement. And this is, of course, my new favorite scapegoat, or rather blame subject. The Yale School of Literary Criticism that simplified and vulgarized what both Derrida and Foucault was pointing to and writing. They made deconstruction, or this move of healing the text, mechanical by automatically negating everything and turning it upside down. This could a bit harshly be compared to a child saying no to everything, stage that usually turns up among children when they are at the ages 3 to 4, somewhere there. It is naive, it's lacking in rigor, and also becomes, because it is mechanical, it's automatic, doesn't take a participating ego or subject or reader. It rids both the text and the reader of meaning, intention, because intention is something you want. This is our inner force to wanting to do things, our energy, our prana if you want. Our energy is becoming less. The passivity is the lessening of the energy. It's absolutely the same thing. There is no difference whatsoever. But at the same time, because these are connected, the interconnectedness of the matrushka, of the Klein bottle logic makes the subject and the text, the reader and the book, simultaneously doing the process together. That is the force of the text. That's live reading. It is living. That gets diminished. It becomes stale, static, and you also have this tired feeling about the read. It's automized, it's robotic, it doesn't leave any choice, because the multiplicity in the text, that is what makes choice in the text. And that choice has to be completely open, non-decided. So by deciding things before, this is the way of, that's the movement of taking the energy of the text and the reader away. It's the decidedness that is before. And there is a most interesting connection I actually found to explain this thing even a bit more. And it's that a person who's suffering from borderline personality disorder, BPD, these people's main characteristic is something called splitting. And I was so glad when I heard this. Splitting is the same as making polarization. The person is simplifying things, people, circumstances into just two categories. That is splitting. Good and bad, right and wrong, black and white, up, down. No shades are any longer being perceived, and the person is also left without options. This is the actual disease of borderline personality disorder. It's the splitting that is this disease, because they cannot work in reality. They can't do planning. They either perceive a person to be 100% good, or either it's 100% bad. All the shades that reality has is for these people gone. And those shades are necessary just with the text and the reader, both for the person and for its environment. Whether it be objects, whether it be persons, circumstances, and also the person's very own thinking process all gets damaged in this process. And why is that? Well, there's a good reason, because the polarities happen by themselves. They are not really triggered by the connection between reader and text. It's no longer environment and the person. It happens automatically. It doesn't take a choice. So these borderline personality disorder people, they suffer from lack of choice. Everything happens automatically for them. And by having no choice, of course, they move their bodies mechanically, and they don't have any energy, and they even lose their thinking capacity. The capacity to discern other people's traits, to know who is the person next to me, something good to me or something bad to me. It's always a mixture. Reality is always a mixture. So these people almost all the time end up with people that are bad for them and situations that are bad for them. So it rids them of the fine-tuning, different seeing. Because reality is in itself fractal. It is not reductive. If it were reductive, splitting would have been okay. But it is not reductive. So you see here, even ordinary reality is affected by misperceptions of reality, or crudeness to the whole thing. And everything in this process, whether you are the polarizing writer, whether you are a member of the Yale School of Literary Criticism, or any other trait of a vulgarization of Derrida, for instance, you will be dependent on others at the same time that you are highly subjective. Highly subjective means that you are making polarization, and you all divide the whole world in either being on this side, the ego side, the subjective side, the me side, the Hans Johansson side, or outside of myself, which is an unjust, crude generalization that doesn't serve any purpose other than putting a blindfold on your senses and actually make it impossible to keep a steady line. It makes one weak and dependent on others, because polarities does not give any guidance on action. Action, intention is very closely connected. Too much polarities, you get this automatic behavior you see among BDP persons, borderline personality disorder, but also in general public. I would say ADHD, other things like lack of focus is also a lack of intention. Because if you give up control, intention, will, your own soul, so to speak, why not? You will have to rely 100% on others in the end. Because there is no action coming out of polarization. That's the stopping of action. That's the stopping of being in control of your own very life. You've given up that control by polarization. And now we see here how, for an instant, classical physics decides the limits of your existence. And you will be delegating, giving to others or relaying to others, deciding power to some outside force. In this case is the majority force that usually wins, but you can also choose to be in opposition against the majority, and that will be exactly the same thing. You are left with no choice at all. And this is the reason so many people today say that different things affect them. They point and say, and I can agree myself. Think about the weather. The weather affects me. Been rainy today, I don't feel good. I wish there was sunshine. That could make me feel good. We put in a supplement, an extra, to help add to this perceived lack coming from polarization. And this pointing to something else, if I have that, it will actually enforce or confirm your dependence on this other. Every time you do that, every time you think that, that circumstance affected me, that will delegate, send your powers to the outside of your control. It is not complicated, it's completely natural. If you say that you are dependent on these things, if you start to believe that, that is also the case. The will is never stronger than your own designation. Saying that you need certain things to be full means you are losing energy, you're losing intention. And this is the very start of decline. We're giving authorization to something completely other for reason that there was an original lack. And rather than being a cure, it will further this lack. And we've seen this all the way back going to the ancient Greeks. It's the arche, the original essence of everything. We trick ourselves, so to speak, to think that once we understand that the arche is everything, or what it is, everything will become clear. We will have understanding. And the lack will disappear. The lack there is in knowledge, in our body, in our souls, in the intention, in our happiness, that will subside once we get to understand arche. We will have knowledge. And that's the whole process in modern times. We want to become whole. So we need to add something because there is a lack. And by adding something, the supplement takes over in the end and makes what you perceive to be your essence something dependent on the supplement. The search for essence never ends. It's never in your hand. You will never get to the essence. None of the Greek philosophers did get to the essence because it's a supplement. The lack was already at the start of the quest. The forgetfulness of the unity is the reason why we look for it. And in modern days, I think that's very obvious when people modern time look for salvation in different things, trying to add something that will help you. It could be a sort of a magic potion that will go to heal us. It can be that lottery ticket that will give us that million or millions, or that could be that new method that's going to do the trick. Maybe I need a special treatment in some special clinic. Maybe I need to get out of the country for a while. It is not always easy to detect, because these are things we do natural because we want them. But with the original lack, it's not a complete want, it's a necessity, and it's slightly different. But it goes hand in hand with this perceived lack. You need to fill it in. If you do it of free choice, of your own very intention, every choice you make will enforce your power, because it will coming from your natural inclination of voluntarily do something, and will become more and more voluntary. It will not be completely voluntary from the beginning, but as you start progressing this feeling, it will become more and more voluntary. So don't go out into the city and ruin everything for you. Don't give up your work directly, because polarities will only slowly succeed, because it's a learning process. So all learning processes, it has a learning curve. And maybe, I don't know, this is just a speculation, maybe that's the reason why deconstruction went completely everywhere in the United States, for instance, where they just turn everything topsy-turvy. And in Greenboro, I think is the university in Washington State, or was it Oregon State? One of those states that are often pointed to be one of the worst ones. I think it was Greenboro. I'm quite sure it was Greenboro. They start attacking professors. They kidnap the principal, kept him captive for 2 days, and every little move he made, they say that's authoritarianism. When he used his hand, they said, you use your hands to control us. You use your authority. So he wasn't allowed to use his hand. He had to sit on a chair for 2 days. It's of course extreme, but it's a very good example. It's a good picture of how it went in the United States. It's too quick, it lacks the definition. They go out the easy way, they turn everything upside down, and it's just a small child saying no. We need difference, we need peculiarities, we need all these odds and ends. And this is of course something that is fairly obvious from logic. Maybe that's the best example. It becomes so clear to oneself. I've been in that situation myself. It cannot be anything between true and false. Both things cannot hold, and neither thing cannot hold. I am guilty of filling out large form of truth, value, columns, and it never ends. There's this internal need for adding clearance, adding clarity, clarity and understanding. It's like a hallucination. Over there is water. You're being in the desert. You are suffering from a thirst that makes your tongue stick to your palate, and you just wish water. And then you strive for this chagrin, this illusion. And once you get there, it moves further, and you move, and it moves further, and so it continues. Food is another good example. Food today has become an obsession among very many people. It's not enough what knowledge learned us to eat. That health is not enough. We need something extra. We need to add this to the food or take away things, usually the case now. Veganism is definitely one of the things. Take away meat and you will gain this supplement. You feel the lack, I take away meat. It's not enough. Lack still there, I take away fish. It's not enough. Take away something else. Dairy products, eggs, even honey. You convince yourself it's something morally wrong with what you do. And this conviction is that you will feel better if you take it away. That's the term. But you cannot ever gain anything by taking anything away. It doesn't work that way. Neither can you do it by adding something. It's the very need that creates the problem. It's not the act itself, in a way. And it's this lack of intention, the lack of wholeness of direction. This strong will that could be fostered, strengthened, made stronger, and by being stronger you will also be able to resist temptations of weakening yourself. And you will start to feel that you've always been full, that there is no lack. And this feeling progresses and it becomes something much stronger than wanting to add something. And I think this is on the personal level exactly the same thing that Derrida do to the text. It needs to be in some way different from each text, because the polarities are not generalizable. They're not out there in an absolute space. No, definitely not. They are always in the text, and it's that peculiar text. And that's another thing that the Yale Literary School of Criticism has done so many times. They say, polarity is out there. There's such a thing as a polarity in itself. No, they're not. Cannot be taken out of the context. It's something that sort of emanates from the text, but it can also dissipate directly. It is not something that should be reified and turn into an existence. This is what you could say. Making polarities existential or ontological, making them something out there. Like empty space or linear time, contradictions are always dependent on the context. They don't just emanate from nowhere and being everywhere, and you can say that's a contradiction and that's a contradiction, and they are everywhere. You see how generalizable things turns up by this way. It's a necessary part of the whole process of making everything the same, generalizable. It starts in a way, and polarities are there. They do the trick of blurring out all differences, putting everything to a distance. You distance yourself to your very own need, your own wishes. What you wish for yourself, what you really have here in your side, dissipates. At the very same time, all distinctions of reality becomes the same, and in the end everything is just black and white, and in the end all the beauty of the text, of the world, of different things to perceive becomes less and less interesting. Because the world is a world with infinite complexity. It is completely fascinating. It is beautiful beyond belief. So it's a dual process that takes that beauty away, but it can be healed. It can always be healed and come back in a greater force than ever before. It's just fascinating. Will never disappear forever out of the picture. It's constantly present. And by taking in space, you heal yourself. You become that wholeness that has always been there. You are retaking your own territory. Do that with the text, do that with your intentions, do that with everything. And for each thing you take in, the more you have. It's a cornucopia. It's something that never ends. All imitations, all the ideas of a poverty of the text, of yourself, of the world, is something that can be healed. Once you let go of this fixation that you need to add something more. Broaden instead. Take in all. That will make both the big picture stronger, but you will also be able to go into the details. Because that is also what deconstruction is about. The very details. And Derrida shows how details disappear once you isolate things too much. Once you don't take in politics, society, thinking, intentions, emotions, food, architecture, the interconnectedness is taken away by polarities and made smaller and not as strong, not as vivid, and not as speaking to you. A living text once more, always a possibility. And I say thank you very much, time to eat, and I wish you a very pleasant night. Bye.